All right, here we go, guys. Jason Wesley Leisnering here for the Tell Me Why podcast. And as I said before, I'm a trainer in New York City, and I'm just a very curious dude. And I like to learn more about nutrition, fitness, health, everything. And so I like to bring people on that know a lot more than I do. And so Mike Zhao will be talking with me. And today on the Tell Me Why, we're going to talk about tell me why single leg work is better than bilateral work. And so basically tell me why a single leg squat is better than a double leg work or double leg squat, bilateral squat. And he's gonna get into a lot of different points, scientific stuff, everything about the differences and benefits in either here or there. So I guess overall, just Mike, tell me a little bit about tell me why single leg work is better than double leg work.
Okay, so it's a conditional statement, meaning single leg work is only better for certain things, and there are certain other things that you're probably going to want double leg work for. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, it's been thought that double leg develops more strength. Mm-hmm. And single leg develops more control, stability, and bullshit like that, which really just doesn't make sense. Yes, you can put more weight on the bar, but that's two legs.
Doesn't mean you're necessarily making yourself stronger.
Exactly, yeah. Precisely. A lot of people have both formally in a scientific experimental research context, as well as informal and just messing around in the weight room, compared the two, and that's not being the case both scientifically and anecdotally. Yeah. But what are some things that single leg are good at, right, or in terms of providing? So absolutely, it does give you a much better platform of training your ability to control your skeleton, your ability to sense the forces that are going through your body, and essentially problem solving.
That's a lot of stuff. I mean, control your body.
Absolutely.
And would you, the second thing you said? The senses.
Sensing forces going through your body.
There's so many more senses going on as far as proprioception and everything with the single leg work and everything like that.
Absolutely.
And so we'll get into that more later.
Yes, we will. Okay, right? So. And with double leg work, you simply have less problems to solve. Mm-hmm. Right? Balance is much easier to handle during bilateral work. Uh-huh. So more or less, you get to focus on just force production.
Hold on a second.
Yep.
Less problems to solve.
Yep.
That's a whole other rabbit hole right there.
Yeah,
I mean, you come up with two rabbit holes right now, right off the bat. You're not thinking as much.
You're not thinking as much.
So neurologically, you're not burning as much glycogen in the brain and everything like that, right?
Sure.
Is that?
Sure.
Sorry. So that's another rabbit hole you just brought up, which is I think really cool. Okay, right. So go on. Sorry.
So there's all of that, right? And so it sort of forces you to pay more attention to your skeleton, your joints, your center of mass, and what gravitational problems you're forced to solve. So, which means, let me back up. All these things sounds like things that court athletes have to deal with all the damn time, right?
Like basketball players,
football, baseball, just anything that's involved free run. Anytime when you have to run around doing anything, this applies. Right? Same thing with fighting. Same thing with just anything where you get to use your body more or less however you see fit. I think where it does not apply for a large margin is strength sports, right? Powerlifting, weightlifting. That's off the top of my head the only strength sports I can think of. Yeah. That's not going to be immensely useful directly to the sport. I mean, I think it still has its uses for strength athletes that want to keep their joints healthy, but for the actual sport directly, not so much. Yeah. Right, because you do want to condition your mind and your brain to get really, really optimized in solving the problems that you're going to be solving when you're on the podium, right? And single leg work won't get you that. And frankly, you know, if you're a full-time strength athlete, or really for the most part, even a recreational one, you run on seasons, right? So, you know, during every off-season training block, you're sort of limited on time. You only have so many hours on developing both mass, skill, and energy system for your sport. So the more time you spend on single leg work, the more time you're not going to be able to get to spend on your actual sport.
Right. What were you saying? So as far as you're talking about, like the powerlifters and stuff like that,
yes,
versus the athletes on the field.
Correct.
So athletes in the field, yeah, you want more strength, more single leg work. The powerlifters and stuff like that, it's not going to really matter, right?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Or rather, it's going to matter a lot less.
A lot less,
right?
Because you want to get the stuff that's most important, and that's bilateral stuff.
Correct.
Okay. Fair enough. And so the main thing is with single leg work, it's primarily for basically life and people on doing field sports and stuff like that.
I mean, that's how I certainly feel about it.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Let's get into muscles used.
Okay.
How many more? You want to talk about the planes too, I guess?
Yeah, it'll be included in there.
Okay, all right. So muscles used. How many more muscles are used in a unilateral work compared to a bilateral?
Okay, so this is not as simple of a question as just counting numbers, right? So with bilateral stuff, relatively few muscles are going to be directly contributing to the activity, whatever it may be, squat, different variations, deadlift, different variations, because your need for stabilization is a lot less, right? Both legs are on the ground. It's not very complex. It's complex in the traditional sense in that it's multi-joint activity, but the actual phenomenon itself not very complex. Most people can learn it adequately well in a reasonable amount of time.
That's to be debated.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, compared to some of the other things. So,
not only debated, but in the sense that you see so many people come in and you see them do a squat, like beginning people,
right,
and they do a squat, and you can tell that they're leaning one way or another.
Sure.
And so we'll talk about that later. But yeah.
Right. So, nevertheless, is a comparatively simple set of movements to learn, largely because you don't really have to watch your balance all that much. It's mostly taken care of for you inherently in the task, right? There's four directions you're going to be worrying about in a bilateral activity: up, down, forward, backwards. Very few people have problem managing their left and their right during a squat or a deadlift. So that means you can, as the lifter, you can exploit the advantage given to you by having two separate bases of support that combine to form a much larger base of support, right? So meaning technically your base of support, basis of support for a bilateral activity is your 2 feet, right? But because gravity pulls downward and you have a torso on top of you, these two feet form a unified base of support that makes up the area taken up by the 2 feet. So you actually have a base of support that's about as wide and big as your torso, more or less. So which means when your center of mass is over your base of support, stabilization is very inherently taken care of within the system. So my point is, you don't have to worry about wobble.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to worry about wobble. So take this water ball for example. If I align it this way, the top of it is smaller than the bottom of it. I don't have to do a whole lot to keep this stable. This is a very different problem.
That's good, man.
This is a very different problem. My base is a lot smaller than my top.
You just came over just now.
I'm gonna be a lot more careful about this, right? So
That's good.
Yeah, so balance is much smaller of a problem, which means a lot of the muscles that are inherently stabilizers, like skeletal at the scale of your entire skeleton, stabilizers won't have a job to do. So then they can either relax depending on who you are, or you can try to get them to contribute to the actual task of moving your center of mass up. Which won't be all that easy. But you know, the examples would be things like your adductors, right? We'll cut our teeth into the discussion by using adductors. So they, you know, just for everybody's reference, they are these guys, right? So you know,
the inner thigh.
Essentially, your inner thigh, right? Everybody, feel free to pause this video and Google what and where your adductors are.
They're huge, right? There's 4 of them.
There's a little bit more than 4 of them, but like they're a relatively big group. They take up a decent sized chunk of your thigh. So just by looking at where and how they are attached, they are very, very good at closing your legs. They are very, very good at adduction of the hip, thereby their name, right? But looking at how they are structured, you can probably also suspect that they also extend the hip, meaning they take your thigh and move it back on your hip joint.
Sort of like kickback.
Right. They're kind of like hamstrings cousins.
Extending back, flexion would be bringing your leg forward.
Right. And so their torque, their potential to produce torque in adduction is semi-unconditional, meaning no matter how you're situated, they can do that, right? I mean, unless it's completed. But until you're completely in full adduction, their potential to produce adduction torque is massive. Their potential to do adduction work, meaning moving of these bones, is massive. But their potential to do extension work is conditional. Meaning, if you're in a 0 degrees of extension, meaning your knee is directly below your hip, these guys will not be able to extend you any further than that. Meaning, they will not be able to take your leg and move it actually to the back of you.
You mean here, going from here to here?
Exactly.
But if I was here coming down to here, they can work.
They can work, right? So because if you know, for those of you who are looking at what a adductor looks like, all they're really trying to do is realign your knee with your hip in a way that the knee situates below your hip. So whenever that condition is not satisfied, they can work to get you there. So in a bilateral activity, much of that isn't taking place, or rather, much of that is being done by somebody else.
Like what?
Like hamstrings, glutes, right? Mostly because your adductors, a big part of what they do is.
Okay, I see what you're talking. So let's go through like a simple exercise.
Sure. Yeah.
You want to do a deadlift?
Yeah, sure.
So a deadlift, you're here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So the adductors aren't. This is a bilateral.
Sure.
The adductors aren't really engaged, but once I go here, boom, single leg, adductors are significantly more engaged. Here.
Yeah. And turn that way. Show them how you're like doing this single leg.
Single leg, come down. Adductors are engaged like mofos, and then when I get to here, they're done. Right.
So if Jason hadn't turned on his adductors, right, and he was on one leg, he's gonna fall in a certain direction, right? He's gonna either fall into the opposite leg that's hanging, or he's gonna fall out of it. Either way, something will not be holding on to his pelvis and situating it on the leg that is standing on the ground.
How much more do you think the adductors are working in a single leg work compared to the bilateral?
Like significantly more. Adductors are
shitload more.
A lot more. Shitload more. Adductors are probably, I don't know, taking up close to half of the load because they're sharing, in a single leg activity, they're sharing this demand with the hamstrings, right? They're doing just as much as hamstrings. Because Everybody feel free to pause and really take a look at what hamstrings and how they're attached to. Most of us know that hamstrings are attached to the back of your thigh, but exactly how are they coiled around the thigh into the pelvis, right? They don't connect in a straight line. So because they don't connect in a straight line, and they sort of, if the pelvis is here and the knee is here, and this is a right leg, right. Their line is actually like this, slanted. It is not a straight line, it is slanted. In other words, if you're on one leg, your hamstrings, before they can aggressively produce force in hip extension, it will probably be a good idea to get them in position first.
Once again, hip extension is just going here to here.
Right. And your adductors can do a very, very good job of getting your hamstrings in position. Without that, you're going to lose a tremendous amount of torque generation.
Tell them how much important that is in the sense that the hamstrings are pretty much, the hamstrings and the adduct, the hamstrings have three parts, that all fit on the bottom of the pelvis.
Correct.
So they are the main ones to bring that hip, to go from here to here. Right. And so the adductors, you're saying also as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Because if you're in a bottom position of a hip extension type exercise, be it squat or deadlift, the back of your pelvis, right? So if this is the front of the pelvis, top of the pelvis, back of the pelvis, bottom of the pelvis, right? So this is the bottom position of a hip extension exercise, right? So the bottom of the pelvis is now elevated, right? Hamstrings are attached to roughly this point, so they are yanking this down. If they are yanking this down, can everybody see how this will pull your pelvis back up into I guess forward-facing position? And the way the human pelvis is designed by evolution, the front of it is heavier than the back of it. So because the front of it is heavier than the back of it, if you just let go, or we cut off your nervous system from the neck down, you're going to start falling forward like that. Which is why one of the reasons that hamstrings are so damn important. They directly prevent the effects of gravity on your pelvis. Right? They're extremely important because of that.
That's deep.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff, man.
Right.
All right.
So, but they, again, like I said, they work on a slanted line. In other words, when they truly function, they are going to bring your pelvis towards whichever foot, either way. And this leads to I don't know if this is a tangent. I think it's relevant. We'll see. This makes me think that the human skeleton was designed to work unilaterally rather than bilaterally. Because had we been designed to work bilaterally, everything would be in a straight line. Everything would be a straight line.
Whoa.
In terms of how your muscles are laid out, right? Without looking at a anatomy chart, most people think that your leg muscles are straight.
Yeah, because they're all over the place, right?
They're all over the place. They're all curved, right? There's a great spiral that runs through the body. Just take Google, I don't know, like muscles or some shit like that, and then
Complete Body. It's an app. Right. Look at it. It's amazing.
Right, and you can take a shot that's zoomed out enough to look at the whole body. There's a lot of spirals, no straight lines. Right.
That's deep. That's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And these spirals allows your lower body, with its musculature and bony structures, to pull the middle of your torso over one side or the other, depending on your circumstances. Like everybody walks, runs, for the most part, jumps on one leg, right? And this system is designed that way because that's the most common thing that we do. We walk more than anything else, other than breathing. More on that later.
Yes.
So, which is why bilateral activities, our brains are not designed for that. Our brains are not designed for that.
Not designed for
bilateral activities.
What do you mean by that?
Because this is a massive tangent, but everybody enjoy. Um, because we have a left brain, we have a right brain. The two are not really connected. There's a bridge between the two of them, but the neighborhoods are not directly connected to each other. For your left brain to talk to your right brain, it's got to go through this bridge. Right? Mm-hmm. For all you nerds out there, if you want to Google this, it's called a corpus callosum. Right?
Corpus callosum.
Yep. And this isn't actually a structure. The corpus callosum is not actually a structure. All it is the massive, massive bundle of connections between the two brains. So it's not actually a structure. If we view this through this context, then the two brains are not actually connected, right? For example, I don't know, your left frontal lobe and your right frontal lobe don't have a direct connection to each other. They actually get a detour around through the corpus callosum and then talk to each other in their respective neighborhoods. So my point is, left brain, right brain, structured almost independently, semi-independently. And they specialize in very different things. Mm. That is a massive topic for another day.
I think let's get to that. That's I like that. That's gonna be another tell me why.
Yeah.
So just muscles used, the amount of muscles used, the amount more muscles used in a single leg work versus a bilateral exercise, adductors, anything else of note?
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
Just
of stuff.
A couple more.
Yeah. Let's not try to kill anybody today.
Yeah.
But so essentially, anything and everything that would be required to keep the middle of your over one leg has to work. Which that is a set of circumstances that is completely absent in bilateral work, but is present in almost everything you do as a human being, and definitely everything you do as an athlete, or as a court athlete, soccer, basketball, baseball, football, whatever you have, because inherently gravity is going to drag you down, and depending on how you're stacked up, it's going to drag you down differently. So in a bilateral activity, once I take my foot off of this side, right? Once I take my foot off of this side, if I would relax my glute med, my outer hip muscles, this would happen. Like my hip will hang like that. And we kind of want that. It's designed that way. So I feel my adductor on a little bit right now because it's keeping the center of me over my foot. Had it not been like that, so you can kind of see this, both of my legs are vertical right now. If I were to just take this one leg off without changing the rest, I'm going to start falling. So for me to really accept everything above my pelvis onto this leg, as I take this leg off, I'm going to start shifting over there, like so. You can see that this is angled now, because the center of me is over this foot. So anything that's involved in keeping things that way, so that I don't fall that way, or I don't fall this way, is going to be working. And as you load and you go down and you go up, all those guys are going to have to start adapting their length tension relationship, like how long they are, how short they are, how strongly they are activated, so that they can support the main drivers of the activities, like a little bit of your spinal erectors, like not a lot, a little bit, just enough. A lot of your hamstrings, some of your glutes, right, and a lot of your adductors. Everybody else comes together to support their activity, because finally, like ultimately, this is about moving your torso up and down, closer to the ground, further away from the ground, right? Which means this is a hip activity.
Hip activity, and just tremendous more muscle fibers recruited.
Sure.
Overall.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so let's get into. We talked a little bit. Obviously, we talked about it. Anything more on the transferability, just into?
Oh yeah. So things you can get interesting now.
Oh really? All right.
Yeah.
Transferability into, like you said, soccer, football, baseball, basketball. Let's talk a little more about that.
Okay, so I think the main factor that makes that unilateral activity more transferable is space. Okay, it's space. Now, the human brain and the human mind, they're separate. The human brain and the human mind are both machines of information processing. And one of the most, I guess, common things that the human mind and the human brain processes is spatial relationships. Right? How two things of any kind relate to each other with respect to space.
So, what two things? The brain and what now?
And the mind.
Okay.
Right.
The brain and the mind.
Yep. Not the same thing. Okay, not the same thing. That's a topic maybe for another time.
Another one. Okay. Brain and mind. The two main things. The main thing that they work on is
spatial relationships.
Spatial
and
relationships.
And the management and regulation of these relationships. So.
All sorts of can of worms coming in today.
All sorts of worms.
Today. Okay.
So. I don't know. I kind of like soccer, so we'll dig into soccer a little bit.
Okay.
So, as a soccer player, as a, I don't know, striker, right? Your job is to penetrate enemy lines. Right? You're gonna have to, at the same time, manage where the ball is in relation to you, and hopefully that comes as a second nature by now. Where all your teammates are related to you, as everybody's moving all at the same time. Where all of your opponents are in relation to you. Within this last part, some of your opponents are going to be more relevant to you, while others are not so much, right? So, what is the striker on the enemy team doing? Obviously, that's going to be very relevant to you, but the goalkeeper, not as much, not yet. You gotta sort of get behind enemy lines first, right? So all these things, they are all spatial relationships, right? These are all how these physical objects, entities, relate to what you're doing. On top of that, your nervous system and your cognitive system, brain and mind, will now have to manage how you are navigating within the space that is the massive court or field soccer is played on. So all these things, you're constantly being managed, and there are specific regions of the brain and specific systems within your overall cognitive system at large that manage these things. So what the hell does that have to do with single leg versus double leg activities, right? So single leg activities, because you have way more spatial relationships to manage than double leg activity. I'm not saying you don't have to manage them, you do in double leg, but a lot less, right? A lot of the problems are taken care of for you.
You don't have to think.
You don't have to think as much. You don't have to sense as much. What are you sensing, right? You are sensing spatial relationships. So your muscle spindles and your Golgi tendon organs, GTOs, yes, that's what Google's for, they tell your brain the spatial relationships of your joints, right? Your muscle spindles informs your brain the change of length, right? But of your muscles. But all that really means, for example, biceps or just any elbow flexors. Going from here to here, yes, all the muscles are shortening, but the brain also figures out the only way this muscle is going to shorten is when this bone is coming closer to this bone, right? So, of course, the same applies to every single joint and every single muscle in your entire body. So it is a spatial map, is a four-dimensional spatial map that all your muscles are essentially drawing for your brain about what you're doing.
Isn't the brain telling the muscles what to do?
No, never. The muscles tell the brain what the circumstances are, what the.
But you see stuff and then you react to it, don't you?
Exactly. It is what you see that tells you what you could do.
Okay.
Right? Because so a really classic example in motor learning in this exact topic is how do you navigate a room, right? So if we're trying to get towards where the camera is, right, and the table wasn't there. The solution will be, relatively straightforward. You get up and go over there, right?
Yeah.
But the presence of the table will change your entire strategy. The table's light, and you know, we're adults. You can just flip the fucking table over and go over there, or you know, you could jump on top of the table, go over there, or you can walk around the table.
Yeah.
But do you see what I mean? Like your what you perceive changes your movement options or your options for action.
So, like, I see this, I'm gonna go around.
Sure.
Boom.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Is it my brain telling me to go over here?
Sure.
Right.
But that's because the environment told your brain what it could be doing without violating certain things.
Okay, so wait, I thought you said the muscles, like here, told the brain what was going on, basically, or something like that. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. Right.
Okay.
So in a single leg activity,
Right.
that forces, okay, maybe not forces, but that allows your brain to get practice on analyzing spatial relationships and coming up with solutions. Which is something every athlete has to do all the damn time.
Right.
At much larger scales. But when you're doing that, you know, just like the soccer, really crappy soccer example, evident of somebody who doesn't know soccer very well. In that example, your internal spatial relationships, like what all your joints are doing, has to be second nature. Because if it's not, you are not going to be able to take care of the tactical components of what your team is doing and what the enemy is doing.
So basically, all you're saying is really the single leg work works with the relationship between your muscles in your brain and space. It just sharpens that connection.
Correct. Right.
That's pretty much.
Yep.
Okay.
It sharpens that connection, allowing you to work on the problem-solving skills you're going to need regarding what your joints are doing.
Right. Okay. Problem-solving skills.
And a lot of times when people have movement dysfunctions, I don't know, crappy shoulder, neck, lower back, knee, all these things are really 9 times out of 10 the results of a breakdown or discrepancy in these problem-solving skills.
Do you think it makes them more, what's the word I'm looking for? Do you think it makes, because I'm just thinking of like, you know, people that would be just doing squats and this like that, and then when you see them try to play basketball, they look, you know,
exactly,
whatever.
Yes.
Do you think it makes them somebody more fluid?
Oh yeah.
Fluid? Just, is that the word? Like graceful sort of?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely, because you know when we see somebody who moves beautifully, I don't know, in tennis, Roger Federer, some UFC fighters, and many traditional martial artists, that grace, that beauty, it comes from efficiency, right? It comes from using force generators, meaning muscles and you know, more elastic components like tendons and ligaments, using these structures to produce movement and torque in a way that energy isn't wasted anywhere.
Okay.
Right, and you can really only do that had you obtained the right amount of information first. Because if you're not sure what you're doing, if your system, your motor system, isn't sure what you're doing, where things are at, your planning is going to be inadequate. Right? Anybody who's planning anything, like all you know, poor motherfuckers that's planned weddings before, right? How important is the information beforehand?
Right. Okay. Interesting. So it just sharpens locomotion and sharpens. That's awesome. Is there anything else you want to talk about transferability? I mean, that's insane. Just that information. I think that's some great.
That's a big piece.
That's just the space, the mind, spatial relationships.
And I mean
everything.
That also includes force production, because you know if like all these spatial relationships, obviously it's invariably time dependent. Because that's something, you know, time may not be, the passage of time may not be objective, but you are going to be traveling through time no matter what. So my point is, for you to do certain things within a certain time scale, you're going to need a prerequisite amount of force production. So inherently in your ability to solve these movement problems, kinetic problems, you're gonna have to already pre-plan the amount of forces you're gonna need to produce, right? So you know, I'm not saying that because let me back up. So I know I know some people out there think the single leg activity is more geared towards movement quality than strength building. It's not so much that that's not true. That isn't true. That can't be true. There's no way that could be true. You can't tell me that somehow doing things on one leg that has way more demand in almost every single way is not going to build you strength. That makes no sense to me at all. Or let me put it another way. If somebody that can do a single leg deadlift with holding their body weight, right? If I'm 200 pounds and I can hold, I don't know, two 100-pound dumbbells or kettlebell in my hand, and I can rep that thing out, there's no way I'm not gonna handle double my body weight with two legs.
Yeah. So you're thinking that people think that single leg work is more for movement quality as opposed to strength building, and I think that most people have. I do anyway. I think a lot of trainers should know that the more you build up one leg, it's going to transfer over to two legs.
Absolutely.
The more you build up two legs, it isn't going to transfer over to one leg.
No, it is not.
Okay. So you could do squats all day and squat 500 pounds, but then the moment you can't do a single leg squat. But if you do single leg squats all day, the moment you get into a double leg squat, you're going to be that much stronger.
Right, and for all the practitioners out there, and I'm not saying that if you're training a powerlifter, months or weeks leading up to their meet, all you do is split squats and single leg deadlifts and not electric barbell for all that time. They're gonna on game day magically bang out a PR. These are just skill related components, right? So you're still going to have to make sure that deadlift and squat forms and skills are in place. If those things are equal, then single leg work is probably gonna give you more bang for the buck. But that's if they already have the skills in the barbell lifts there.
Okay, so that leads us to our last topic, and that is a beginning person. What do you think? What do you think they should focus on more? Do you think somebody just starting out, kid, should start out with trying to do squats, or you think they should do more lunges or stuff like that?
Yeah, I think the latter, because a lot of people that come in that can't manage bilateral activities. Much of that has to do with their ability to sense what's going on. Meaning, when I say what's going on, I mean their ability to sense the ground, gravity, and the weight or center of mass of their skeleton, of their body. Because one of the most common things, anybody who's trained anybody, especially in a metropolitan area like New York City, one of the most common pitfalls that clients come in with when they squat, they don't hit depth, right? And when they don't hit depth, what happens is their torso comes too far forward, and their butt goes way too far back, right? From at least from my experience, a lot of that has to do with two things: hamstrings and obliques, right? Hamstrings, obliques. Because those two things combined are not able to keep their pelvis controlled. So then their motor system, see, like the human motor system is very, very smart. The moment it detects that there are insufficiencies in certain areas, it immediately goes to make up for it in other areas. So in this particular case, with somebody where their chest goes too far forward, sometimes even arms coming forward to help, and their butt goes too far back and not enough down, their chest is coming forward to act as the counterweight for their butt going back.
Yeah, interesting. Right? Yeah. See it all the time.
All the time, right? We all see this all the damn time. Because the preferred counterweight is the forces produced with your hamstrings and your obliques. As your butt goes back, what it should really happen is go back and down, right? Because your feet and your knees or your feet and your shins are not going to want to move too much because they're at the base for everything else above it, right? So if you're going to go down, if you're going to lower yourself in a squat and drop your butt, you're going to have to first go back a little bit and then come back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't just infinitely go back. That's called falling. So which means something has to hold on to your pelvis while all of this is happening. Your chest can't do it, and your quads cannot do it either. A lot of people, they're such quad dominant squatters.
Just
right?
starting if you're just starting out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And hopefully not later.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah. So then you're now going to have to come up with a way to address this. And depending on the person, I think just getting their hamstrings stronger may give you more options, right? Because your role as the coach, as the trainer, you're going to have to tinker with their motor patterns and figuring out what they're deficient in and get them to first of all sense these problems and then do something about it, right? And a lot of times just playing with these factors within the confines of the squatting movement or whatever movement that they're sucking at, not gonna cut it.
Right? Sucking at in the sense that everyone that comes in and starts with a squat doesn't know what to do, and so as they learn, it's just like anything else. I'm gonna suck at learning neurological stuff at the beginning. Everybody's gonna suck at it. So yeah, that's anyway.
Right. So then a unilateral movement may give you a lot more, may open up a lot more options.
Yeah.
Right.
Strengthen those adductors more, work the hamstrings more, be able to stay upright more, work the obliques more.
Absolutely.
All of that.
Right. And the unilateral movements give you all of that. Not because there's something inherently special about these movements. No. But because your brain is forced to process way more information. It's forced to figure out how do you relate to the ground, how do you relate to the ground, and how are you going to solve these problems.
I love that. That's just, I think I maybe had a thought of that subconsciously, but to really put it out in the forefront as far as the brain's forced to work more in unilateral work. And I think that's just awesome.
Because anybody who's done unilateral work intuitively knows that.
Right. Yeah. I think about it. It's like it's just like a deadlift or any lift like that. It's the difference between that Daniel Kahneman book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and so you're so focused when you're deadlifting, as opposed if you're running, you're not. You're just not thinking. If you're walking, you're not thinking. But a deadlift, you're thinking. You're focused, and then also a single leg work. I never really thought about it, like you said, subconscious. But you're focused so much.
You're focused so much. You can't talk.
That's good.
If you get good at it, you can probably have a conversation while you're deadlifting, like barbell, right?
Right. Yeah.
Single leg? No. You're going to probably immediately start falling. Yeah. Right. It's because of this. It demands so much more of your attention because you're processing just a massive stream of information.
Yeah. Well, man, I think this was awesome. I think just the benefits of single leg movements versus double leg movements. Talked about how many muscles are used. Talked about the transferability. As far as a beginning person, then we got into just the brain and how it works and everything like that. It was amazing. I loved it. We got some new topics we're going to be doing podcasts in the future, the difference between the brain and the mind and everything like that, and then some other ones as well, I think. But I think that was great.
Yeah, let's go.
Anything else you want to talk? I mean,
that's probably about it.
I think that's good, man.
That's good. Yeah. A lot of things got covered.
We're going to do some more. Good work, my man. Loved it. All right. This is Jason and Mike Zhao. Tell Me Why podcast number 2. We're out.
Take care, guys.